Good morning. From this video, I'm going to explain about the history and evolution of special education for the children in Sri Lanka. Content, introduction, early stages, colonial period, post-independence era, changes that occurred from 1972 to 1980, changes in the system after 1980, the situation after 2000, and challenges in current situation for the children with learning disabilities, and the sources. Introduction. Sri Lanka is a country that values education. The adult literacy rate is 96.3%. Too many children living with disabilities are missing out on the benefits of education. They have been in existence for a long period of time, and where the special students were segregated from other students. Nearly 3,000 children and adults with disabilities and 3,000 family members of children with disabilities in the rural areas of Anuradhapura, Trincomalee, Matale, Nuwara and Puttalam districts in Sri Lanka were reached through the European Union funded Together project, which concluded in 2017 December. The main providers of education for the children with special needs are special education units attached to schools, special units under the Ministry of Education, and a limited number of private institutions. Early stages. Sri Lanka is recorded as a country which has a rich culture and heritage spanning more than 2,000 years and proud history in supporting people with disabilities. In 3rd century BC, Buddhist Emperor Ashoka organized care institutions for people with disabilities. Under the rule of King Buddhadasa, this practice was once again revived. Colonial period. Missionaries started institutions for children with disabilities. Most of these institutions operated as charities and looked after rather than educated children with disabilities. The first school for students with disabilities was established in 1912 and catered for children with deafness and blindness. Since then, more than 27 special schools for children with disabilities have come into being across the country. In 1939, under Education Ordinance number 39, assisted special schools were allowed to enter free education system. And under the Ordinance 30 in 1944, 75% of the salaries of teachers in school for the disabled was given by the government as a grant. Post-independence era. In 1948, Code of Regulation for Assisted School was revised and education of children 6 years to 14 years was made compulsory. This education policy mandates free education at the primary, secondary, and tertiary levels. In 1961, children who are not profoundly disabled may be admitted to school. From 1969, students with disabilities have been integrated into regular schools through special classes and more recently through enrollment in regular classes. Early services focused on students with blindness or visual impairment. Changes that occurred from 1972 to 1980. By 1970, the Department of Education realized the need for special education in Sri Lanka after the program of inclusive education, where students with special needs such as blind, crippled, and retarded students were given placement in regular schools and in the same class with ordinary students. In this picture, you can see children with special needs integrated into a regular classroom atmosphere. The program was highly successful as within first 10 years and was applied throughout the island. It has produced number of A-level qualified students with special needs, and few years later, 10 totally blind students were able to enter the university in 1972. An integrated program for students with intellectual disabilities began. Changes in the system after 1980. Handicapped students who are not severely disabled were given placement in regular classes along with their normal peer with regular class teacher teaching them from time to time. A special teacher intervened to help the special students. Under inclusion, children with special needs were taught in regular classes by a regular class teacher who also helps children with special needs. In keeping with the Gazette proposals of 1997, the Ministry of Education has issued circulars to schools and regional officers to ensure that children with learning disabilities in each educational division have access to special education school and special education units. Remembering Mr. K.P. SAIIHE, who guided the special education mission of Sri Lanka, he entrusted with developing programs for all categories of children with special needs after heading the unit for special education in 1970. He has commenced teacher training programs at Maharagam Teacher College for blind, deaf, and retarded children. In 1984, he was appointed as a consultant in special education for Vietnam, serving as an executive committee member of the International Council for Education of the Visually Impaired, ICEVI, won ICVI International Leadership Award for Special Education. This is the picture of Mr. P.S. SAIIHE, chairperson, addressing the Asia Pacific Special Education Seminar held in Japan, 1984. The situation for children with learning disabilities after 2000. In 2006, there are 25 assisted special schools in Sri Lanka that are governed by boards of management. These are non-government schools and that are assisted by the government grants in aid to fund teacher salaries, school textbooks, uniforms, and special teaching aids. There are about 950 special classes in regular government schools. In addition, private schools also implemented educational programs for children with special education needs. Education participation among children without disabilities is 95% for children between 5 to 14 years and 65% in the 15 to 9 years age group. In stark contrast of the reported 10.6% of school-age children in Sri Lanka who have disabilities, 10.2% do not attend school because of their disability, meaning only 0.4% of these children attend school. The quality of education in Sri Lanka is compromised by unequal economic development, a history of civil conflict, and regional imbalances. Education has been significantly affected by a 30-year-long civil war, leaving hundreds of thousands of families and children displaced in the northern province, disrupting the education of many. This also resulted in a high prevalence of war-induced physical, cognitive, and psychological disabilities. Challenges in the current situation. In 2016, UNICEF Sri Lanka commissioned the Learning Disabilities in Sri Lanka report, and it found that 23.5% of children aged 5 to 14 with disabilities are excluded from mainstream education. And among us, those who do not attend mainstream schools, participation in educational activity reduces with age. Around 55.4% of the disabled population aged 15 to 19 and 86% of the disabled population aged 20 to 24 are not engaged in any educational activity or vocational training. Most of the dropouts are those children with special needs. Lack of skilled teachers, lack of appropriate infrastructure in schools, limited scope in curricula, and the overall quality of education. The number and quality of those schools and units is insufficient and requires expansion and quality improvements, meaning that children are missing out. Children suffer as a result of lack of understanding of their needs. Even the gifted children are treated as children with special needs. Special education is required for developing talents and capabilities of gifted children. The educationists develop special education for the gifted children in many other countries. Parents of the normal children oppose the idea of teaching children with special needs in regular classes. Children with special education are talented in some areas. For instance, the blind have very sharp senses, except vision, and are talented in many ways. Deaf children are also intelligent, although they have problems in acquiring language skills and concept development. No education policy or methodologies will not be fruitful if that segment of students are neglected. absence of proper system to identify children with special needs, and marginal cases where the children have some impairments such as slow learners, children with slow growth. Therefore, special education programs should be improved with qualified officials as administrators. Need of more public awareness about available mechanisms and bringing about necessary services for children linked with civil society organizations and local administrative authorities, as well as health and education authorities through medical camps. Sources. Thank you very much for joining with me.